I will sit down in a minute. I'm just checking that everything is set up okay, because I'm not going to be able to see the screen once I sit down, and I just have to have faith. I also want to make sure that if by chance anyone jumps in, that I can see any comments. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Hello to anyone who hasn't been to any of my lives. Predominantly I stick to a set idea or concept for them, with the hope that it makes them replayable after they're done. So I suppose I better introduce the tag that I'm kind of revisiting, and that was a tag created by the lovely Larkin legend, which is Logan, and you will find him on YouTube and Instagram. Logan created the deck reconnect tag, and I decided to do it, I think it was around the time it came out, but right at the end of the year, as far as I'm aware, I jumped on and did a live choosing the decks for 2023 that I wanted to connect or reconnect with, and discussed a bit about why. So if you haven't seen that video and you would like to, it's in the live section. It's a bit weird when you go on YouTube, if you're actually looking through someone's videos and it's not just in your subscription list, then the lives are separated from the rest of their posted content. That happens on everyone's, as far as I'm aware. So you might want to just, if you're ever browsing my YouTube for any strange reason, you're very welcome, and yeah, click the live tab from time to time to see what I've posted. Good morning. Hello, Project Refined Life. Hi, Mad Witch. It's lovely to see you too. Hello, Tammy Ann. Welcome. So if anyone has anything that they want to chime in or discuss or share, feel free to do so. I do have you off to the side, so I can see I can sort of see the comments coming up, although they're usually a bit delayed. But I figured I would do a two-part deck reconnect, what's the word I'm looking for? Check-in, basically. I want to do a first quarter, which is obviously this one, and then right towards the end of the year, I'll do a final quarter check-in as well. And that just sort of makes sense to me. I'm kind of cheating because, of course, the first quarter has been and gone. But this will do. Hi Ellen, welcome. Hi Place of Stillness. There's more people today. I'm surprised. Is this a good time of day for YouTube lives? I'm always curious, because I know that where I am in the world, the best time for me to do a live would to be as late as in the evening as possible. But unfortunately, my pain has usually got the best of me by then. But for the first quarter check-in, we won't be visiting all of the decks that I mentioned by the by, although I have them all written down so I can let you know the ones that I mentioned in the original video, because I haven't used all of them yet. I definitely wanted this to be a flexible process. I chose very carefully because my aim was to use everything that I'd put in the reconnect video, but I knew that with some there might be a bit more of a seasonal flavour, and that of course I wasn't just going to use all of the decks from that at once, because that would be a bit of chaos in my experience. So I'm starting off with the first deck I mentioned, and that was the Dark Days Tarot. And I'm hoping, hello Peekaboo Rose, you are welcome to lurk while you work. I'm hoping that this is zoomed in enough. I know that the artwork is quite intricate on this. If anyone wasn't aware, I'm not sure if it lets you do it on YouTube on the computer though, but you can now zoom into videos on mobile, at least anyway. So if you ever can't see the details, not because I don't want to zoom in for you, but because I have a couple of other decks that I want to include with this that are going to take up the screen. So yeah, this is the Dark Days Tarot, and I have been using this, but I have been using it with, well, we'll start off with the first deck that I started using it with. This was one of the decks that I said I wanted to have in my kind of everyday rotation. As in, not every single day. I mean, just a general, there was no study intended. This is a deck that I have had for, what is time? I've had it at least 4 years and not used it anywhere near as much as I wanted to, for no apparent reason other than I probably had it stored in an inconvenient way originally. And this is the Reclaim Oracle, which is far newer. When did I get this? I feel like I got it for Christmas. Again, my timelines are not entirely to be trusted, but I think that's around when I got it. And they really struck me as an interesting combination created out of the desire of wanting to use the two decks together, which I have discussed. I'm sorry if it's a tiny bit repetitive for those who watch my monthly practice insights and reflections, or you may have seen this on my Patreon, but I'm really loving these two together. And the reason that I enjoyed them originally was so superficial. I wanted to use them both, and they have, if it's not the same cardstock, it's almost the same. I am such a tactile creature. It feels divine together. I really love this cardstock. And I wish that I knew what kind of cardstock it was, because whilst I'm never going to create a deck, I can't imagine, it's really friendly on my hands, and that's something that's important to me, and something that you don't always get from, in my experience, from indie decks, because there's a lot of thicker, less flexible or larger cardstock coming out nowadays. So welcome to all the lurkers, by the way. Hey Meg, have I missed anyone? Hopefully not. You can shout at me otherwise. So I know that's really superficial, especially for me it is anyway, but that's why I started using them together. But I find this to be a very emotive deck, the Dark Days Tarot. My experience of it as it's evolving, because I started doing tarot poetry with it, which is one of the reasons that really compelled me to it, is I felt like it would inspire storytelling more than some of my other decks. There's something so whimsical about this world that at points it feels like the place that we inhabit, and then other points we've got these mer people and this direct contact with animals, people riding whales. There's something kind of quintessentially fantastical about it that is a real yummy place for me, I suppose. And it does it. I want to read the stories. I want to create something from the deck, which is kind of a different, I'm losing words today. What's the word I want? No, it's left the building. Intention, that'll do. It's kind of a different intention than simply getting a deck because you want to read your cards with it. Like, I wanted to pull cards and like tell their stories, and that's kind of a thing I have going on that's a part of my tarot reading, but also like an adjacent creative thing that I have going on with the cards and other emotional workings and somatic stuff that I do alongside the tarot, I suppose. So that was really what inspired me to get this deck, along with my actual buddy who we created the tarot and poetry sitting together years ago, Tim? I'm trying to say too many things at once. Kim of Heartland Magic. Tim. She would laugh if she saw that. She had this deck and loved it. So that's kind of, I will obviously talk about the Reclaim, but that's not, this was not the focus of Deck Reconnect, because obviously, like I said, I got this just at, I think, the cusp of 2022 going into 2023. So I really enjoyed that about it. And then the reason that the Reclaim Oracle has felt like it's been a continued useful experience, one, aside from the fact that I'm having a real kind of moment with deck pairings and deck combinations. It's in a big way. I'm having like a massive love affair with it at the moment in particular. I've always done it, but it's not been so just consistent, I suppose, and so varied so quickly as well. But I think between the really emotive way that I find this to be, and it takes me away from that kind of analytical focus that is not my only focus by any means, but it's a very dominant facet of just me as a person. We've got then this oracle deck that's entirely based on emotions. That's what the Reclaim is. It wants to give you the emotions, and there's no words that are kind of emotions, but really they're experiences, or they're set like this is emotions the whole way through the deck. It's quite wonderfully tender, vulnerable and brutal all at the same time, just as emotions are. And I thought, what a great way to lean into the experience that I'm having with the Dark Days Tarot and enhance it. So for me, this is really a pairing where I suppose the way that I work with them, the approach and the theme and the presence that I get from them are complementing each other, because I do enjoy playing off of contrasting decks as well. But that's kind of the thought secondary to, oh, I want to use these together. And that's interesting that they're both kind of like monochrome and, oh, they feel the same, and the kind of silly initial things that I genuinely had. I just want to check the comments. Yes, the Mother Tarot is the same creator as the Dark Days. It's very thin but sturdy cardstock. Yeah, it's really interesting. It's so damn flexible, and I like to call this old school matte, which is probably a term I've made up. It's matte before matte had that weird rose petal finish. So I'd imagine this is what matte lamination is, because every now and then with matte lamination, because nothing is perfect, right, you'll see like a little bubble in the lamination, and that's from indie decks to mass market decks that use this type of lamination. But it definitely is matte. It's not what I would refer to as satin, but I'm not a stock connoisseur, and in terms of being a cardstock snob, my snobbery is really only around two things. When I put money towards something, I want it to have longevity, because I don't spend my money lightly, usually. Of course, sometimes I do, but I want things to last. And there's many reasons, not just the duration of how far the money goes, but of course it's more eco-friendly than keep having like a backup, if you can even afford to do so. But also I want something that is friendly to my hands as much as possible, as someone who gets a lot of pain from shuffling. So that's kind of, when I talk about cardstock, if anyone's curious, that's my particular lens. And that's changed a lot, because I used to love the really thick stuff, and then my hands changed their mind. You like pairing decks if you can. Yes, deck pairings are good fun. I have a third to add into the mix here as well, but these two were kind of the starting piece. And I have done a piece of poetry, which is on my community tab on YouTube or on Instagram, dependent on your preference, that inspired a piece of poetry-ish, journal-y kind of. That piece in particular is more what I would call like a creative piece of poetic writing. But maybe that's me just being careful, because poetry arguably has things that make it poetry in particular, and I am not one who tends to pay attention to that when I am doing pieces, even though I run poetry things. So yes, I'm really loving these together. And then I thought I would risk it for a biscuit, as we say. Well, I'd say over here, as we say in my family. I don't know how common that saying is. This is quite an emotionally infused experience for me, like I say, just based on the fact that the Reclaim Oracle is utter crux of an emotion, and there's quite a lot to be seen in that already and explored. Also, they have these really enjoyable, like whimsical little additions around both of them, even though the art styles are different, which are fun. But anyway, I have another deck that I can't remember where and when I've mentioned it, possibly again on YouTube or possibly on Patreon or both, which is the 𝗳𝗺cie Oracle, which to me, it kind of embodies, it's like, not fully, because this is a tarot and it does have a different vibe, but it's a little bit like smashing these two decks together and creating something else. The 𝗳𝗺cie Oracle for me is a very, again, visceral experience, less analytical, more about getting to the experience, the feeling and the senses underneath the thought, because these things all get intertwined and entangled with each other, of course, and a lot of the time on a daily basis as humans, and I'm not speaking for everyone, but just in terms of sort of commonality, we tend towards letting our brain and our intellect and our thoughts kind of run or take up a large portion of focus. And as we know, thoughts aren't fact, but also there's sometimes when we get towards the underlying, underpinning experience of it, it changes the thought or helps us understand why we're in the narrative that we are. And the 𝗳𝗺cie Oracle is a deck that I find to be very much that way. But it's got a lot to say or invite me into energetically, which the Reclaim Oracle does just from the foundation that it is an emotion focused deck, and it does have these pretty, I would say for me, evocative images where I can kind of feel into what I'm seeing. So putting them together is I don't mean risky as in like other risky things, real risk in life, but in terms of how much I want to get into that with my cards, it's kind of risky business in that fun, playful way. Hi Marlena, thank you. I'm glad that you're happy to be here. It's nice to see so many people. I wasn't expecting it. So that's kind of my experience of adding this to the mix, is that so far it's been really successful, but I definitely don't add more than 2 tarot cards to the mix because there's quite a lot going on here. If anyone's not familiar with the Dark Days Tarot, the white cards are the majors and then the minors and the courts are the black ones. So you do have an occasional change up. Look at these 3 together. If this is not a powerhouse of a reading, this is what I'm talking about. So we've got, and I did shuffle all 3 of these before I put them here, but I didn't look at, I just shuffled them. So they had a bit of updated me in them. So we've got the Death card from Tarot. We've got Change, which if death doesn't speak to change, then I don't know what does. And I don't just mean, people will know that whilst I have no issue with seeing death as a transition, I don't like to soften the experience that death can have to offer us and the realities of experiencing death, whether it's metaphorical or you know, very much real. I don't like to soften it and to the point of not being present with the difficult experiences that we have. That's why tarot's so fascinating and fantastic. And I feel like I would do myself a disservice or my clients a disservice if we didn't learn to be with discomfort in a way that's helpful and healthy and just expressive as well. But we've got death, change and justice, which is what I mean by these cards, because it's such an interesting just to me, there's so much to read from just 3 cards, which is why I said I didn't add more than 2 tarot to this pairing ever so far. I'm already getting the kind of snake skin shedding imagery going on, because as people know, I love to work with animals, and I have reptiles, so I work with, I have some here actually. This is not a snake, this is leopard gecko, and they're meant to eat it. Leopard geckos are meant to eat their shed, but Jagger is in his older age, he never was 100%er anyway, but in his older age he's not so much of a fan, especially he leaves me a lot of towels, so I have that. Yeah, I want to say that for me, when I think about this, I think about how, because people talk about transition and shedding, and sometimes the focus, I suppose, is on the outcome, and that's great because that's a great motivator, but I never want to focus on the outcome to the point of I'm trying to get from A to Z without having the process in the middle. And usually I find when we try and jump, it kind of keeps us in a really uncomfortable other place. And the thing is, with any animal that sheds their skin, honestly, just watch someone on a video, watch one of them on a video. The sheer level of friction that has to occur as they literally rub themselves on like rocks and things to try and shift it, this old skin that they have to have off of them, because if it stays on, then it can really start constricting, it can cut off blood flow. Like, shedding isn't just a process of unearthing a new them. It's like it's a must as well. You can't leave shed skin on a reptile. A leopard gecko will lose its toes if it's got shed skin on it for ages. It dries, it hardens, it constricts, and metaphorically it kind of keeps us where we are. And I like the concept of these in terms of justice. I didn't come on to do card readings, but here we are. Justice I talk about a lot. Conceptually, I find it difficult to make it small. That's the only thing that I have with justice, because justice is so much more than one person. And so I often find when justice shows up, it's nothing to do with just about me on the tiny microcosmic scale that I exist and what I feel like justice would be for me. It's kind of a big scale settler across the board. And for that, so many people have to go through microcosmic deaths and changes and uncomfortable fucking transitions for justice to create some kind of weird equilibrium balance thing that kind of serves across the board on a purpose, I suppose. And it's not going to serve everyone in the same way to the same level, because unfortunately, even in nature, it doesn't work like that. And everything to do with justice and everything to do with balance and equilibrium is changeable as well. That's like the one given we've got, right? Everything is in constant motion. So yeah, I like the fact that it's got a smiley face and a sad face as well. Like, it could go either way. Meg's saying this is such a brave pairing. Yeah, like I said to you before, brave, stupid, who knows? But I'm really enjoying it. And honestly, it gives me just overwhelming kind of, not in a bad way, but just overwhelming invitations to explore, that I'm going to stop there with these particular 3, because I could go on for ages and I'll completely forget what I've come here to do. I'll just get into, let's read the cards together. Perhaps we can do that another day if anyone's even interested. But yeah, how cool are these 3 together? And these 3 are what I would call an aesthetic pairing, which I have no particular preference for whether a pairing is aesthetic or not. This, of course, being massively subjective anyway. Although I would say, in my opinion, people are probably more likely to understand and agree that these 3 look nice together than some of the like really mix and match pairings that I do and other people do. So yes, to to summarize, how do you summarize that, especially with that reading? Just oof, 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 oof. And look, the Queen of, oh yeah, I'm not reading these ones because the Queen of Cups is the cup is a womb, and I could work with this and the idea of scarcity and holding a light for yourself in a big way as well. I have literally just been talking about, and yes, that is my door knocking. Oh my God, I have to go and get my door. Please, I'll be back in a second. Only I would get a knock at the door whilst I'm doing it live, I swear. Yes, to summarize an otherwise big topic, which if you are on my Instagram, then perhaps you've seen me talk about it in my Instagram stories occasionally, or some of my posts. And then if you're on my Patreon, you're actually gonna hear me mention it later in the month. I have scheduled stuff up, but the fact that scarcity and your light came up with a womb picture, and this is one of those moments where tarot's really interesting because I can work with the Queen of Cups, but at the moment all that I'm seeing is a womb, and the short version is I have endometriosis and a very, very torrid relationship with just, yeah, that whole area. So scarcity and light is another, it's a gut puncher, it's a gut puncher. So yes, in summary, before this tries to crack me open any more than it's already attempting successfully, I'm loving the Dark Days Tarot. It's been a real treat. The deck reconnect for me wasn't to potentially weed decks out of my collection anyway. That wasn't my motive. I mean, my main motive for joining in was that my friend created the tag. My secondary motive being that there was a few decks that I really wanted to work with. I have a fairly large collection for a manner of reasons, of which I'm happy to discuss another time, or watch my collection wrap up video. But they rotate and I use them, and that's how I like it. But there's some that hadn't been used, and if some do happen to end up going out, then that's fine too. But this is definitely not one of them. This is one where, if anything, if I do happen to whittle down my collection, it's helped me recognize why I chose this, what I really love about it, and just, I suppose, how I find that my reading skills are really revitalized through this, or just energized, or I don't know, pick a nice uplifting word. Enter preferred word. Yeah, it's a vibe, it's a vibe. Oh, hello, Byron. It's good to see you. You really love these cards, but I cannot buy the Dark Days. I don't, do you know what, I'll be honest, I have no idea if it's in print either. It is a lot of energy, isn't it? It is a lot of energy. And that's okay, Giselle. Have a lovely day, my dear. So we're going to finish up with the Dark Days reflection because I want to make this video watchable, and like I said, I've got a couple more to go through that I have already used. Whilst I'm putting those away, let me double check. So the next deck that I mentioned, I have indeed been using. So we will just go straight on to that one then. And that one is in this, of course it's in a snake bag, because apparently I need to be present with the shedding of things today, or I don't know, this week or whatever. I freaking love this bag. I did have this particular bag custom colour, custom size, because the next deck is, I don't know, a fair size. I want to say that this is definitely one of my larger decks. And I will be really honest, this is the Story Medicine Tarot Animal Woman edition. every time. I will be honest in saying a few things. I held off on this deck for the longest time because in my world it is pricey, and whilst you can never know if a deck's going to work for you, I'm quite a, what's the word, I don't buy many decks on a random whim. So I like to do my research, but also I don't tend to buy decks that have larger cardstock because, as I say, due to my hands and pain and stuff like that, I don't want to buy stuff that's going to upset my hands anymore. I have stuff that does, that I am already too attached to, like the Brady Tarot, but I don't want to bring in stuff purposefully that's not going to agree with me. But this has a really, really thin, flexible linen cardstock that feels so good to me. So good. It's one of the more shinier linens, if anyone's curious. I don't want to talk about cardstock too much, but needless to say, I really sat on this deck because of those two things. Because an expensive deck and a deck that's too, you know, quote unquote too big for my hands, I can shuffle it. I shuffle it long ways. It shuffles really smoothly as well. I say smoothly, like that's as smooth as this is getting for me, especially on camera. But this has been an absolute beauty to enter into my practice. But interestingly enough, even though I've been on the deck combination, I don't know, I can't think of a good word for it, but basically I've been on it. Whatever it is, I've been on it. I haven't used this in a combination, I don't think, at all. I obviously pull multiple cards from it, but I don't know. It's a really interesting one because I have my relationship with tarot and what I know to be true. I have, of course, when I say what I know to be true, in my little world of what I think tarot is and isn't, I have all of the things that I fall back on in terms of what tarot means and the methods that I use. Then I have the question and the energy and anything that comes up intuitively. And also then this layer of being sparked from the artwork. This is a very non-traditional tarot deck, and it has these very, I would say, soft quotes on it. And that's one of the things that's really interesting about this deck in terms of my collection, is that it stands out because it's so gentle. It is so gentle, but it has these really visceral, emotive, visual depictions still. And oh, side note, one of the other things that were just a little bit, I don't want to say uncomfortable because that's too much gravity to that, but just not for me, like not my flavour, is using the word God in anything. It's just not my flavour. You'll notice I don't even really say the word goddess. I kind of stick to deity, although I appreciate sometimes when I'm talking about things, perhaps they wouldn't necessarily be considered a deity. But it's just not a word that is, and unless I go, oh God, it's not part of my vocabulary in the way that it's framed in this. So I did notice that when people were using it. But I think, hey Tamara, welcome. I'm trying to catch everyone that jumps in. I remember reading a while, like many years ago, and this is something I think that's just good for us across the board, is being able to understand the context of something and then either let it flow over us if it's nothing to do with us, or replace it. And in this essence, someone was talking about, I think it was actually to do with one of the psychotherapy books I was reading. Like, some of the older stuff has a lot more of the people's religious orientation in than a lot more of the newer stuff. And the orientations were a lot less diverse then as well. And the replacement of God for literally whatever you want to replace it for, which is very much how it's being used in here. You know, universe, Gaia, energy, like in terms of animistic energy, whatever you want to replace it with. So that's hello Dee Dee, hello Thea, welcome. You're all welcome to lurk. I feel very blessed. I've never had so many lurkers. So that's kind of, you know, all of the asides. This deck is an interesting one because I'd say that I tend to hold myself together very well in the presence of others, because part of my career and training is to be a container and to, of course, have emotion, but to be able to hold space for that in a certain way. And what I love about this deck is sometimes you can use something that's so good for you in an unhelpful way, because we're human and we're complex and all of that fun stuff. And it is not something that I always need to do for myself when I'm on my own. And this deck, it really just shakes the shit out of that foundation, basically. It's a very long way of getting around to, and I'm sorry, but it's the only way I can explain it, of really just, yeah, shaking my shit up and being able to crumble a bit in the presence of many skills that might prevent that from happening, but in a way where it doesn't feel like a judgmental lens. Like, if this was a human for me, it would be perhaps I wouldn't call this like a therapist deck. The embodiment of this feels a little bit more hippie to me. A little bit more hippie. It does remind me of people from my past, but mostly in a good way. You know, people who brought me fantastic experiences and strange and interesting experiences, but were a little bit offbeat, but there was like an uplifting, loving, emotive energy about their presence. That's kind of how this deck feels if I was to really like personify it away from myself. And then in terms of like having a relationship with it, it's ended up being one where I have a lot of emotional communication at the forefront. So one of the themes, I suppose, of the two that I've really chosen so far for the beginning of my deck reconnect, and I've done so, I suppose intuitively, like I've followed the flow. I didn't think, oh, I'm going to use all the emotional decks. I think these things often come out, you know. It's, I've definitely been working through some shit, mainly because in a very interesting way, I felt like I could relax a little at the beginning of the year, because I finally got a mild handle on the shit show that is my body and my pains and all of my conditions and yada, yada, yada. And then I was moving through some stuff with that, and then I caught COVID again. I have long-term COVID anyway, on top of everything else, and it completely took me back into a really, really difficult place. And so one way or another, I've been working through this kind of emotional processing at the forefront, and less kind of analytical, or less kind of I want to say everyday tarot readings. So I haven't been pulling cards every day. Sometimes I've been pulling them barely once a week. But the readings that I have been doing have been very much that way inclined. And these decks in particular are ones that I feel help evoke that in me, whereas some of my other decks don't necessarily feel like they artistically invite me into the same experience, or energetically. So that's the best way that I can really explain this. And I have used this deck several times with a tarot reading client as well, because I am reading again, and it very much echoes a very similar experience for me. But as soon as I transition into the reader for someone else, of course I have that wonderful container there again. But for me, it's just reinforced the fact that it's not just me having this experience with this deck. It's definitely not. It's a real mover and shaker. There's something, but if you were like to get to the core of the earth and then flick something that kind of slowly rumbled all the way to the outer core, that's how this feels. Yeah, I'm really, really happy with it. And I think that when you've toyed with a deck for so long, and when it's been a bigger investment, it's so nice when it pays off. You know, it's kind of an ideal world situation. And I've said this before anyway, but I will add again, because I have an animal practice, and in terms of however I've identified, before I identified as a witch, now when I do previous terms I've identified with, current ones, animals have been the core of just since my birth, basically. And I would say that that's a big part of my witchcraft. I think that it's not always easy for people to understand, because it's so much away from the altar, a lot of it as well. But the fact that it's very much infused in this deck, while she's coming from a different cultural perspective, which I recognise isn't mine, there, of course, in terms of not the cultural tradition taking place, particularly in the majors, but in terms of the working with the animal in both a very real sense and then a spirit sense, or you know, like an otherworld sense, it's very much something that I feel relatable and akin to. So I am digging this, but I have not used it with another deck, and I don't know that I will. So yeah. Hi B, hi Exploring Tarot, welcome, welcome. So that is the Story Medicine Tarot. My gosh, it's nearly 45 minutes already. But interestingly enough, so they're the two key players. Now, in my deck reconnect video, I mentioned, as I said, the Dark Days Tarot, which for anyone jumping in, we've already covered. The Story Medicine Tarot, which we have just covered, the Animal Woman edition. And then there's a few that I haven't used yet. It's not been their time. So I'm not going to show them, but I am going to make mention. So I want to... The only real study deck, which is really funny. I know people have feelings about studying decks and what that means, and I don't mind. We all do things differently, but I don't really want to... It's easier for me to explain how I studied a deck after I did it than before. So I'll share that when I get to it. But the only one I chose for that was the Tarot of Vampires, and I want to read the book. And I read a bit of it, and then I've been doing all this other stuff. Reading is not my strong point at the moment at all. Like, to an embarrassing level. Only embarrassing for me, not because anyone's reinforced it, just because my brain is a jerk. So that's not had its time yet. It will, I have every faith that if it doesn't happen any sooner, that seasonally it will kick in the autumn months for me. Because whilst I don't tend to set too many decks aside seasonally, that is something that has a bit more sway sometimes. And then the other decks that I haven't worked with yet, like in terms of the reconnect, is the Maiden Oracle and the 𝗪𝘁𝗍𝗪 Tarot, which I showed together because I will use those together. And then the Victorian Fairies Tarot. I very much think the Victorian Fairies in particular, and yes, that's an out of print deck, apologies, although somewhere on the grapevine someone was saying it might be reprinted, but don't attack the messenger. I don't know. It's definitely a grapevine thing that I heard. I feel like that one will come out by June at the latest, because the Fae really start coming into my practice in a way where I more want to see them in the cards. And whilst the Victorian Fairies is a completely different flavour, I will mix it with my other Fae decks. I also am feeling it with Woodland Warden's Oracle. I think that will be a really nice pairing. And I will probably pair it with the Maiden Oracle as well. So perhaps the Maiden and the 𝗪𝘁𝗍𝗪 will come out around a similar time as the Victorian Fairies, we'll see. So before we get on to the last deck, they're the ones that were mentioned in the video, but like I said, I will do a final quarter catch-up recap as well, and that will be right towards the end of 2023, and I'll share the rest of those decks, which means the video won't be too long, so I'll have already discussed these ones. There'll be no point revisiting them too much again. But then we have the other deck that I mentioned, which is Autumn is Your Study Time Too, Back to School. Yes. It's kind of weirdly programmed, isn't it? There's something about the academic year that I can't seem to shake. And especially because my birthday's in summer, when the summer period hits over here, I feel like I go offline a little bit mentally. Like emotionally I'm fine, but mentally I'm offline. So the other deck that was in that video was a cheeky edition, because it wasn't a reconnect, it was a connect. But, you know, make of the tags what you want to in some ways. And like I said, I was going to be cheeky because my friend created the tag. So I utterly took liberties, which I'm sure they don't care about. This is the Wild Unknown Alchemy deck. And I thought I would discuss this, even though I haven't used it, because I thought I would process some feelings with everyone. And so, to do so, I wanted to get my deck, which I have used, loved, adore, is one of my tip-top decks, by the same creator, and that is the Archetypes, which in my opinion is, whilst large, and both of these are difficult to shuffle, but like I can't shuffle hexagons. Is that what it is? Is it a hexagon? Is a hexagon of 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is 6 anyway, so I'm already wrong. Damn. I can't shuffle it. It makes me feel a little... It's beautiful. I can shuffle it, look. Ah! And I'm probably doing a lot better job than perhaps people anticipated. But I'm not enjoying it. And the longer it goes on for, the more chaotic it becomes. The more difficult it becomes. Like I said, if I had 4 decks in my rotation, in my collection, you know, perhaps one difficult deck would not be an issue. But... oh, spring. Hello, month. See, that just makes me want to keep it. But anyway. I already have enough trouble with this. It's great in every other way than, I don't know, I've got, especially for my height, I've just got tiny little hands. Where are my tiny hand people at? Where are they? So, why am I talking about this one when I have not connected with it? I've not used it. Why? Why haven't I used it? I haven't used it because I don't like shuffling it. And then I'm in two minds because I don't know if I want to learn alchemy in depth. And I don't know, yes, you can have a deck that you don't, you know, we don't have to know everything and blah, blah, blah. But this is me. I do like to have things in my practice that I either planning on having a reasonable knowledge of or I already do. Especially with decks that are kind of themed and structured so heavily, because these two decks are, even the archetypes are broken into, like, I don't know how the creator would refer to the categories, but like family categories basically. And I don't mean family in like mother, father, I just mean they're family paired together. And the difficulty is archetypes make a lot of sense in my practice, but of course alchemy does, but in terms of this very kind of learned way of looking at alchemy in its more nuanced facets, I don't know how much space I have mentally at the moment to do that. And like I said, I know that this is the Reconnect recap, but this is something that I have been sort of mentally thinking about over the process of those months and working with the other decks. This has kind of been like, I walk past my bookshelf, most of my decks are out. I've got one drawer that's got decks in it and a box that's got decks in it where you can't see the individual decks, but I know every single one that's in either of them. So this is out on my bookshelf and it like glares at me as I walk past. It's like, you know that you don't like to own stuff that you don't use. And obviously I can't use like 85 decks all in 1 month or whatever, not gonna happen. But there's intention of use and stuff like that. And normally I would get a new deck and it would be straight into rotation, and it was very briefly. And the thing is, and I'll flip through some cards for you, I like reading these from what they are, what I can see. I know what spring is, I know what winter is, I know less about copper. I have a bit of a relationship with copper, especially the relationship of like as it slowly, I can't think of the term for this, but when it starts to go green basically, and the cleaning process of that and the chemical reaction that it undertakes. I'm a big fan of copper things. I like copper. I don't have much, and mainly because you can't get a hold of a lot of stuff, and I don't know if that's because it's not environmentally accessible or friendly. But I have a couple of copper pots, and I bought some copper piping that's made into a gaming headstand for my partner. So he likes it, that's what he's got. So I have a relationship with that. It's no secret that I don't have a lot of information about, I don't have a lot of knowledge, about astrological stuff, planetary stuff. None of those bits are my strong point, which of course there are various symbolic kind of elements included on these cards in particular as well. Just to explain, because often people see this on my altar and then they're like, well, why would you get that? Why would you get this, Tegan, if you don't know anything about it? I was very, very kindly gifted, which I did say when I got it, but I was kindly gifted this by the creators of these, which are Pandora Witch Shop, when I did a sizable order for birthday and Christmas sort of bundle with them. So I'd saved up, and my parents put in, and my partner put in, and I did an order because that's the only time I was going to be able to get stuff from there, and they put a couple of things in for me, and that was it. And I like to use it on my altar because I do a lot of I just put offerings on it and do rituals on it, but that's why it's there anyway. Tamara says, I have small hands. Yes, the Alchemy one is very nice. I got a small mini one of Archetypes because of this reason. I bought it twice, so it's okay. Yeah, they're kind of, they're not huge, but again, small hands. So, and you can see I can't even pick up all of them at once. So I know my hands are silly, but silly small. But so there's all these inclusions of this, and I'm trying to decide, I suppose, whether this is a deck that's worthwhile owning, prudent to own, where for probably the foreseeable future, I'm going to work with it in a very, I'll say, intuitive way. Of course, it's going to be informed by anything I do know about Neptune, and informed by things that possibly are very, well, I would imagine are very purposefully included in the artwork, like the colours and stuff, which do have a lot of play with me. And I tend to come to the same conclusion and summary of things that I see in the guidebook when it comes to that kind of element. So you could argue that I can read it, but I don't know alchemy in the same way. And I don't have a relationship with all of the planetary stuff. And dissolution, what I would associate that with is possibly not what it means in an alchemical sense. Whereas archetypes, you know, I've spoken about it before. Many people can work with archetypes. This is not why I'm saying it. Archetypes are for everyone. They're in everything. I really feel like they're in everything. Yes, it's a very human framing to look at it, but we have human brains, so that's what we do. But in terms of like having an idea or a story or something tangible slightly to explain a really big macrocosmic, or I don't know, medium experience, again, energy or something that takes play, like archetypes make sense to me for that. And then as a therapist, archetypes make sense psychologically as well. So when you've trained for so long in something, it becomes your language. In the same way as I would never choose to give someone I know therapy. Firstly, it's massively unethical. At least it is considered so in this country. It changes from country to country, but my assumption is that's across the board. But it's very funny because you can't, there's a part of you that will always talk like a therapist or always have a facet. You know, that's how I function. That's my beliefs. That's part of my values. So this is like my language. Mostly, this is my language. And not all of it, like the gem, is not something I would see in psychotherapy. But the archetypes of this will continuously make sense to me. So yeah, this is my language. This is a different language. And normally I really enjoy that. But there's something about it being alchemy and wanting to... I try not to take things too seriously. But it's kind of the whole intent behind this deck. And it's of no judgment to anyone else. But I don't know if the way that I work with it is enough to warrant keeping it. And that's kind of where I'm at with it. Although I am obsessed. I am obsessed with the artwork so much. So much. Is there any good book on alchemy for noobs? I'd love to know, as I have a different alchemy deck. Oh, good question. Yes, hit us up. And if you don't watch this live, hit us up in the comments below, please. And I will share, because I would really like to know that as well, actually. You've been tempted by this deck, Project Refine Life. Do you mean this one? The one that's giving me tricky business? Oh, sorry if I keep fidgeting. I am having nightmares with pins and needles on and off at the moment as well. And it's not fun. It's like having ants in your pants, but perpetually. You okay, Zoob? Yeah? My cat's just come in. She's like, hey mum, it's 4. It's 4 and 4 is dinner time. She has to wait until I come off, unfortunately. So yeah, it's a bit of a strange one, because I have to say, whilst I don't want to get into collection discussion, I've had collection discussions. You can find them elsewhere, or we can have a whole live for that. But I don't want to get too much into it, but to give like a mild insight into mine, whilst I don't have like a set number, I have a general idea in terms of comfort of how much I want in my space and to just own overall. Which is obviously very personal to my experience and where I'm at with life and stuff. So when I think about decks and I'm trying to kind of be mindful of this, one of my things is I really like to know that I'm going to use something at some point, and that it's going to bring something, mostly, unless it's an animal deck, it's going to bring something a little bit different to the table, especially with an oracle that's not an animal deck, right? I've made this no secret. Animal decks are kind of a thing for me in and of their own for many reasons. But if it's not an animal deck, I'm like, is this offering me enough that I am not already doing with the Archetypes deck? Because they look great together and I can really vibe off of them with each other. Oh, Venus and Eros. See? Vibes. Vibes. But, and I will answer your question in 1 second, don't worry. Is it enough? And obviously no one can answer that question. Although, honestly, this is one of those, I will give you the invitation. Share your thoughts. You're welcome to share your thoughts about what I've said about this, and where you would, if you were me, and having this same, it's not a conundrum, because again, it's got too much weight to it, but, you know, contemplation, where you would land. Ooh, breath and the warrior. See, breath, if it was just breath, but I know there's an alchemical layer to this that I am not understanding. It currently doesn't compute. But let's get the guidebook out, because people want to see it. People want to see it. You haven't missed the guidebook, no. I haven't. I like guidebooks. I read a lot of them. I don't use them very often after I've read them. I don't like to be beholden to them, but I obviously don't mind referencing them if I'm not reading for someone else. And I wouldn't use something that I would need to reference a guidebook for if I was reading for someone else anyway. That's just a personal kind of rule. So let's find breath. There is a really, I would say, a fair and, to me, interesting write-up at the beginning. Kim's writing is like anyone's writing, an acquired taste. I don't mind it. It's a lot better, and again, better being my opinion, in comparison to the tarot book. So the Archetypes book and this book has a lot more to offer that's helpful in terms of the artwork, in my experience of the Archetypes one. I've read the whole beginning of this all the way up until the meanings, and then I've only read a couple of meanings. So let's get them for you. Of course, this is broken into, what are they called? Roman numerals. And finding Roman numerals in books always takes me a while, as you can see. So I'm sorry if you're gritting your teeth and trying to tell me that I'm going the wrong way or not fast enough. But there we are. Are we? No. Haha. So it has the same kind of experience as the Archetypes Tarot. I've read almost the entirety of that guidebook as far as I'm aware, and I don't use it. We agree on a lot of them to a point. Then obviously there's a lot more expansion for me, and also there's a lot of yeah, just other stuff that I add to the archetypes and places where we don't align. The creator has a lot of practices that I have no knowledge of, and when I say no interest in, I mean respectfully. Like, I have no interest in learning them and taking them up for various reasons. So yeah, I don't even know what the name of some of them are, but her expression of spirituality, or whatever you want to call it, is very different from mine. But this is very similar to the archetypes in terms of the time, energy, and additions that are included. So in that sense, if you're happy with that book, you will probably be happy with this. I will add one more preface. Someone who was far more alchemically knowledgeable, it's not hard to be more than me, but, you know, up there, made a fleeting statement that there was some issues with this, and then they didn't say what, and I couldn't find it, and now I don't know what. But I would really love someone who actually is, you know, alchemically knowledgeable to weigh in on this deck at some point and let me know if it's, in their opinion, a worthy component. But we've got breath, and you have keywords: inspiration, presence, life force. You have the bulk of the message and the go deeper, to ponder, and then these also, they're like additional prompts or considerations. So here it says, there is no more direct way to practice alchemy than to study 𝗎𝗲. I'm going to guess that the P is silent. We all have access to the mystical phenomenon known as the breath. It occurs at every moment, gracing us with the gift of existence upon the physical plane. If alchemy, as is suggested in this book, is the merging of physical and mystical, then this card serves as our ever-reliant bridge. Ooh, interesting. It is the magical within us, the expanding and generating life force that animates our life. This card may appear simple, but it's not. I should really have the card. There we go. Where was I? It's not. No matter how advanced you are in studying the breath, if you heed the message of this card, you will find it has more to teach. Bow to it at this very moment, and you will discover the work revitalizes itself. New space opens. 𝗎𝗲 is your lifelong alchemical ally, stating its love with every inhale and exhale. It's a very beautiful meaning. It's mildly abstract. That kind of works for me, but again, like I said, I don't have any extra knowledge about how someone in alchemy would talk about this, so I don't know how on the money it is, and that's why it makes it harder for me to speak to in that way, if that makes sense. It says, go deeper, take one deep full breath, and to ponder the first breath. Ooh, the first breath we ever took. Now that is a ponder. And then at the sides, with these often, well, always, I would imagine, again, thoughtfully included symbols. So here we've got the infinity symbol, we've got what looks like air, and then these spirals. It is no coincidence that nearly every spiritual and mystical lineage bows to the breath via observation of it, meditation, or breath techniques, pranayama, or chanting, or song. So pranayama being, at least I know that from yoga. And we use breath in therapy as well, of course. And in physical health, they utilise the breath as well. Like in long COVID, one of the techniques that were offered over here when I was a part of the course they offer you before you go through the hospital stuff, because that's the way around they do it, it's to help regulate the breath again, because it can make it dysregulated. And some of us will have dysregulated breathing anyway, because I do. And then here it says, when the 𝗎𝗲 card appears, it is a call to make room, to expand and soften the approach to the work. The other cards present in the reading may benefit from more spaciousness too. I feel like that was, as someone who has no idea, like I said, of how this is being used, in an alchemical sense. I feel like it's a solid write-up. My thing was, I would buy a book for the exploration of alchemy further because it could benefit loads of my practice and be interesting if, at this current stage, if the deck sparks something in me. Because again, then I need to save and put money away for a book, then I need to find the book, then I need to read the damn book, which, again, like I said, reading, not my strong point at the moment. So I'm kind of a bit reliant on this or my experience of this, which is interesting again, because like I said, I wouldn't have worded it in this way, but I do some versions of breath work. I have shared breath techniques on Patreon and stuff as well. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Oh, I hate shuffling it. And I've really got to find a way to want to use it and be called to use it if it's gonna get past that shuffling point. So I felt like that was a worthwhile addition to Deck Reconnects, because as much of it's fun to enjoy, it's fun to share those that I'm enjoying and my experience of them. Also, hey baby, my experience is also of like not coming to this so far because of the resistance and the ponderings and sometimes confusion of a few elements. And I can't help but want to know people's opinions who already have far more knowledge in alchemy, because like I said, I'm not waiting for that kind of layer in reviews or information when it's a deck like the Archetypes, because I've got my Archetypes down. We're cool. And also, I think there's so much breadth for that we don't have to read them the same. What the mystic means to you is perhaps different to me, even though they're these grand energies, and you know, that's cool. But there's something in my more analytical experience or desires that are telling me that I need answers in relation to if this deck is like legit. Basically, that's the crux of it. Dee Dee said, sometimes the artwork is power enough for me to keep a deck, and I often end up being thankful I've kept it. Lots of people are liking the book. It's going on your wish list, you're keeping an eye on it. It's very funny. It's the one of, like I said, I tend to have things on my wish list for so long that I often talk about decks that are really old. I have old decks anyway, but you know, I'm very late to a lot of parties. Not in real life, not that I party anymore, but in terms of this, I'm very late to a lot of parties because of that, and I'm okay with that. That doesn't bother me in the slightest. But because it was Wild Unknown, and it's no secret that I have, it's interesting because I have no kind of relationship or feeling towards the creator, not in a horrible way either. I just never felt compelled to look into them. I have tiny amounts of knowledge on them. I don't follow their personal Instagram page anymore. I just, yeah, we can't know everyone, right? And it just never, I just wasn't compelled. But in terms of the artwork and these creations that are coming out of this person, I am really into them. So my partner pre-ordered this for me because they often do like pre-order really low discounted prices as well, which I'm sure is how they lure people into spending money. It's worthwhile being mindful of. But he had the money and he pre-ordered it for me because I knew it would be the last deck in this series. But it's not enough for me to be like, oh, well, I love all the other decks. I don't feel like I love all of them, so I must have this one. I've said it jokingly, but that's not actually how I feel. So I'm kind of, yeah, I wish it was round. I feel like, I know this is ridiculous, but I have to be honest. If this was round, I feel like I'd be having a little bit less of an issue with it off the get-go in terms of using it. Because this is a beautiful card. I'd still be having the alchemy issue. I still want someone who knows this stuff to tell me how well researched this deck is. Which sounds like a commentary on the creator, and it's really not meant to be. I would want to know that from anything, you know. People ask my opinion on animal decks. I am not a freaking... I didn't do any legitimate animal studies. Everything I've done has been by choice. I don't have a BA in animal science or anything impressive like that. Like, there are better people to ask. But because it's a passion and an interest, and I do know more than your average human being, and I study a lot of science, animal biology stuff, and then a lot of mundane stuff, people will ask. And so I want to find the alchemy people and ask them about this deck. That's kind of where I'm at for that. So that is my deck reconnect, folks, because this is an hour and 15 minutes. And whilst it's lovely hanging out with people live, I try and have some forethought for my replayers as well, because I am thankful for all folks. It is particularly nice when people are on the live, just because energetically it's this kind of distant feeling of having people around you when you do it, which is nice. It's a change up from doing a set kind of video and then editing it and all the extra footwork, legwork that goes into that. But yes, in terms of replayability, I want to end it there. So if you haven't done deck reconnect and you want to, there's no time limit on it. It came out when it came out. I decided that I would use it as a prep for 2023. I think that was sort of the intention. And then because I am me, I thought I like discussing my practice. Let's do a check-in. So thank you for hanging out with me. Oh, I just want to catch one more comment. Dee says, I do know a bit about alchemy and this deck seems smart to me so far, but I'm just now getting to know it. Oh, okay. Thank you for sharing though. And Tamara, you're going to look into this tag. It's a very like loose, chill tag, so it's a nice one that you can kind of do your own thing with, if that makes sense. Not that you can't anyway, but and it's not that far into the year, right? So I will be looking out in case anyone does jump in who hasn't already, and I'll be recapping towards the end of the year. But if you follow my other stuff, like my monthly catch-up videos and bits and pieces, you may very well see snippets of the other decks coming into play, and you can see how well I stick to my word later in the year about what I worked with and what I didn't. So thank you for hanging out, folks. You rock, and I will be back soon. I say soon. I will not be back until May now. I have hospital results tomorrow, which is why I'm on today, because I'm distracting myself. I am very panicked, but hopefully it will be okay. Yeah, I have hospital results. I have a lot of shit going on, and then have a little break with my partner, which we need. Hopefully we won't need it because of my hospital results, but so yes, I will be back in May with my usual. Thank you and bye. Oh, I say bye and then how do I end it? There we go. Now I'm saying bye. Yeah, you say bye too. Okay.